Hey fan peeps, this is your podcast host Kunal here. I started this during the pandemic, and in this podcast I discuss my nerdy thoughts and hobbies with you, with the occasional special guest. From anime to Zeppelins, we talk about it all. Whew. Alright. Gotta love life sometimes. Gives you a lot of surprises. Alright, none of you know what the fuck I'm talking about right now, because we had a bunch of technical issues before this. But you know what? That's life. You move on. And sometimes you need to have a North Star to guide you when you get there. And in this situation, I brought on a good friend, Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
How's it going,
buddy?
That's right.
It's going great.
You're more than a buddy. You're a friend.
True. It's been years.
It's been actually a legit decade since the new year.
Long and exciting adventure. Gosh, it took us several years to finish this show. It's so great.
It did, yeah. So today I brought Patrick on because, let me start there. So I did a research paper. Specifically, it was actually my seminar thesis that I did for Dr. Marsili's class.
Mhm.
And it was mainly about how Bruce Lee changed the world, but I had to historicize it. So I talk about his influences in culture and then like certain situations between Afro communities and Asian communities and how that worked together. And yeah, it was a really cool project. And as I was researching for it, I found this one term that happened like after he died, since he was so damn popular.
And died so suddenly.
Died so suddenly, and he was so like, so lucrative and so ever present everywhere and iconic that there was this term called Bruceploitation. So you had Bruce Lee, Bruce Lee, like Lee, and then you had a guy from Korea who looked like him. They wanted to copy him. Because as fast as he came is as fast as he left. That is not a sex joke. That is just really unfortunately, something that I just realized now, and I'm kind of mad about it. But regardless, in Bruceploitation, there was a drop-down point, and I found it on Wikipedia, but like I used Wikipedia at that time to just to look at topics, then I'd look at scholarly sources to go from there. And there was like Bruceploitation, also known to create copies of Bruce Lee. And then one of the subpoints was this thing called Fist of the North Star. And I was like, what is this? And then they explained that it's a post-college world, it's a post-apocalyptic world. And it's basically that setting, so Mad Max post-apocalyptic with Bruce Lee, and the guy kills people because he's trained in an assassination art.
And glorious over-the-top head explosions.
Right, and by pressure points, and he yells like Bruce Lee. And so Bruce Lee meets Mad Max in a post-apocalyptic desert. So after I did the paper, after I graduated, Patrick is one of my anime dealers. If you want to watch good anime, you go to Patrick.
I've been by the anime bug a long time ago. I especially like the 80s sort of hand-drawn looks and stuff.
I love that too. 80s and the 90s more for me. And then when you showed me a lot of the OVAs, like Midnight Eye.
Oh, I love the OVA stuff.
It's like underrated and
perfect amount of space for them to explore a concept, and usually only get one or two, so it's not 400 episode burden.
Exactly, and that way you can it actually leaves you. There's so many stories that they did that I'm like, oh, they should have done more.
Oh yeah, it totally leaves you wanting more.
Yeah, and that's kind of disappointing, but like even Cyber City Alito has become one of my favorites.
That's a great one.
Love the intro, but so we would hang out. Like it was a very big bonding exercise for us to hang out after college ended when we were trying to figure out our lives. I mean, hell, we're still trying to do that.
Oh yeah, for real.
And
it was a great excuse to see my buddy Kunal again.
Same. It was a cool experience to just like come and hang out, because Patrick also had he's bashful about it, but we not only had a history class together, he was also a fellow history major, but you also did Tai Chi with me.
Oh yeah. And we did a lot of great stuff in college.
And then we were walking back home, and I'm like, hey, where are you going? And you're like, oh, I'm going to Marquette. And I'm like, what floor? And he's like, and it was like, you're going to the 11th floor? And like, what the fuck?
He lived right down the hall from me, and I never
literally like on the other side of the hall. So that's why I never saw you. But like, it was still kind of ridiculous that you were just down the hall from me.
And we became fast friends and immediately bonded over anime.
We had a lot of love for history and martial arts. We fit in pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, like I said, post-college adventures were like, I would watch something that Patrick brought, and then Patrick and I would watch episodes of Fist of the North Star. And we were like, oh, it's cool. He's just like a mindless monster of the week, bad guy of the week, kind of going in the
flexing muscle man,
right.
Like He-Man. You know he's going to save the day at the end of the episode.
Exactly. And with this, it goes in, and then I want you to jump in about the setting and everything, but give us your
Oh,
background.
sure.
Yeah.
So my background with this show is I've always been interested in this style and this era of animation.
Mhm.
And right after college, we were looking for a new one. I forget what we had finished before this, but
I don't remember.
we were bouncing around. There were a couple ones that we were like, oh, no, I don't like the dub. Or, oh, there was just one episode. We watched it all.
And yeah.
And I remember there was this goofy YouTuber. I don't even remember his name, but he advertised Fist of the North Star as the manliest anime ever. Manliest of all time.
There's a lot of testosterone.
And he was just going over the top about it. And so that kind of got it stuck in my head. I was like, oh, yeah, this is good. I think he'd also recommended Armored Trooper Votons, which is another great show, but that's mecha stuff from
Gotcha.
the time.
Yeah.
So when Kanal said that he had come across this thing researching this paper and it was a lot of Bruce Lee stuff, I was like, oh, yeah, I've also heard that it's the manliest anime of all time. So we should watch it and check it out. And I think we were hooked in the first episode.
Oh, yeah. Especially because like he's using pressure points to kill people, and he says the classic phrase "omaema wa shindeyu," and it's highly memed. Thank you. I practiced a little bit. And it's a highly memed show. Like you've seen it everywhere. You've seen it on Reddit. You've seen it on,
especially that catchphrase.
Yeah.
You don't even know that you're already dead.
Right, and then he just walks away, and the guy, like anyone who's fighting, just explodes. And I'm like, show me how to do that.
The first episode was so great because it introduced all these concepts. It was also so simple.
Yeah.
Right? It's a man in the desert. It's the sort of the Western feel of the slow build of the man wandering into town. What's going to happen? And then, it becomes over the top, awesome action scenes.
And the thing is, when we were prepping for the show, there is so much that we're going to talk about because it's so dense. And just because, like, if we do, then it's going to be like 4 more hours.
Yeah. Over 100 episodes. I think 152.
150. Yeah. And you don't expect it because it just seems so formulaic in the first one, and it is, but it's a good formula though. Like
very much formulaic because of the low budget, I would say, not
and
because of lack of ideas.
And the time was it was made in the 80s.
There's a lot of panning shots over a background landscape to fill time
with these epic shredding guitar solos.
Yes, the music is also wonderful. That intro and outro of the first season are amazing.
If you're ever going through something, this is the best soundtrack to listen to.
Puff your chest out, put your chin up.
That's right.
Make you want to work out, or at least strut around the local park, getting your steps in.
Oh, totally. And just everyone looking at you like going like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah.
But yeah, so there was. I just want to let you know that we did our best to not spoil too much, but there are some things we had to spoil in order to just highlight some amazing parts of the show. So now you know, and back to the episode. So there's also references. You had the part about Mamiya.
Oh yeah, so many of the characters, especially after the first season, where it definitely feels like, I'm not sure how it was in the original writer's room, but it definitely feels like they didn't realize how popular this was going to get. And so they had to inject more story, more plot lines, more characters in seasons 2 and beyond. So they really flesh out the backstory. It goes from being post-apocalyptic to future post-apocalyptic. It's not, the 90s when the bombs dropped. It's like couple hundred years in the future.
So it's set in 1990X, whatever the fuck that means. And
it means any of the years in 1990, but clearly it's not.
So what Patrick's talking about is like this is not a huge spoiler. This everyone sees coming a mile away. You defeat the main bad guy, Shin. He's the guy who actually gives Kenshiro the 7 scars and then throws him down a chasm.
I guess we should have introduced that. He has the Big Dipper on his chest and scars.
And there's
stuck his finger like a knuckle in.
And it doesn't make any sense and how he doesn't, kill him in the process. But yeah, he just throws him down there thinking that he'll be dead. And he's like, if you're worth it, you'll come back and fight me. And he totally does. So when he kills Shin and then tries to save his girlfriend, he's like, oh no, she jumped off and everything.
Yeah.
And then then Kenshiro's like, oh my God. And then Shin jumps off. And then you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. They both fell to their death. We just panned over the background to show this.
Yeah. And then
they both come back.
And then like the next episode, you learn that she did jump, but she's not dead.
Yeah.
And that she is actually far more important than you'll ever understand at this point. And I don't want to spoil too much in the show, but you find out that there is more to what's going on. So essentially,
every character.
Yeah, like essentially, Ken learns the assassination style called Hokoto Shinken, and I'll go over that more detail later on. But you find out that there is actually other divine assassination arts that are taught in tandem with other people, and a successor is chosen. Now they're supposed to keep the balance of the world in check, and if any of these opposing, not even opposing, but just counterpart assassination styles fight each other, the balance is disturbed, and so that's what happens.
Yeah, which is also interesting that the plotline is all about these kung fu schools. You're
Right.
like, well, who dropped the nuclear bombs on this wasteland? It's
And
like,
they
"Oh, we
don't
don't know.
they don't answer that. And there's even a flashback later on. This is a bit of a spoiler, but there's a flashback later on where they show you Ken Shiro and some of his adopted family living in like a very nice place. Like it seems like it's advanced technology, like
That car looks like it's
luscious,
from the future.
luscious. It's I think it's a flying car.
Yeah.
It's like not on the ground at all.
Not taking place in the 90s for you paying attention.
Right. And so you're like, well, what the fuck is going on? So then you learn that the apocalypse maybe didn't happen everywhere all at once. So there's a lot of mystery that goes on. And we did not read the manga. I only saw one of the OVAs, and we're only taking this from our experience today just to show you like, why we think it's so awesome. So that's what we're going to delve into today.
So that's our disclaimer. We've watched every episode of the anime, but we watched it in Japanese with English subtitles.
Right.
Don't know how good the dub is.
And there's a lot of cultural things that we just don't get. I did as much digging as I could, but trust me, stay on the ride with us. So,
because a lot of it will go over your head, and a lot of it was just other stuff that was popular in the 80s when they really had to flesh this show out from just being sort of a monster a week. Something shows up. I mean, I think he fights a tank in the first season. And just like kicking a tank.
Why the hell wouldn't you? Like he takes out a whole like artillery.
Yeah.
With just his body.
The giant monster that never shows up again. It's like, are there mutants? No, they're all human after that one giant monster in the first season.
That's another thing too. Like the way that, and you pointed this out a lot when we were watching it. They do this thing where they'll show you a human who's a bad guy, and for some reason everybody is roided out. They apparently were like stockpiling protein powders before the bombs were dropped and everything.
All the good guys are starving and shabby in their
any
robes.
Like kung fu assassin schools are jacked as well, but they're not like jacked to the 10s. They're more jacked to the 9s. Jacked to the 10s are like bad guys. They're like roid rage 100%.
And the show plays with perspective, but it also plays with the character's heights. A villain might just be 9 or 11 feet tall.
They just like in one scene, and then you see him in another scene where they're dying, and they're like, "Oh, they're normal size now."
Yeah,
it's like
sometimes it's very size as how dramatic the music is for the show, and sometimes it's just, oh, yeah, this guy's just supposed to be 9 feet tall.
Yeah,
they always have mohawks or like football shoulder pads. It was hilarious. They always looked like GI Joe villains.
GI Joe villains, or like definitely you see the Mad Max influence coming into there.
Yeah, Mad Max definitely feels like one of the major influences for this show. And Mad Max was the first movie was 1979. The second movie was 1981. So you very much have Mad Max 2, not I forget when Mad Max 3 Beyond Thunderdome came out.
But near the early 90s, I think.
Yeah, you didn't get to the silly Mad Max yet. It was very grim and very serious.
Yeah.
Because this manga was originally serialized in Shonen Jump from 1983 to 1988. Aired on Japanese TV from 1984 to 1988.
Yeah.
We didn't start watching it till 2014 or 2015.
That's right. We started 2014, and then life, and then just we were jumping back and forth between number ones. And we didn't finish it until like right before the pandemic.
Yeah, I want to say 2018 or 2019.
2018, 2019, which is kind of funny because then like right after that is when we probably should have watched it.
Yeah, the themes alone, a man against the world.
That's right.
Probably would have been better there.
Struggle of sadness would have helped us during COVID quite a bit.
Yeah.
Or maybe it would have made it worse. Who knows?
But yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
One of the things I really want to focus on is just how much stuff from other shows and other movies in the 70s and 80s influenced this, and why it feels so fun to Western audiences.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I don't think people realize if you don't have family outside of the United States, how much of an influence the US is in the rest of the world, for better or for worse. So take it away.
It definitely feels like the 80s rock guitars, but just some other stuff I saw. Of course, the Mad Max influence. One of the villains, Rao, who doesn't appear till later seasons, I think he totally looks like, if you've ever seen this painting by Frank Frazetta's Death Dealer, this is the enormous horse, the armored guy.
He's on his horse Kohuko, and yeah, they look super ominous. There's even, so this anime actually heavily influenced Berserk.
Ah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, and before the author passed, well, not before, but when they were interviewing, he's like, yeah, I love Fist of the North Star. And it's even the same kind of tone of like a struggle of sadness and this guy against the whole world, just like constantly alone. Even though he does have compatriots from time to time, like Bot and Lin,
Yeah. They're
who are
sort
kind
of
of
irritating children, though, so
they help out every once in a while, but they are kind of irritating. They help out a lot more in the later part of the show.
yeah, when Bot gets a little older. But in the very first few seasons, I don't know, it's hard to tell if he's
Yeah,
I want to be a loner versus get these annoying kids away from me. They're a liability and
right. Like,
punching death dealer.
and Kenshiro is a man of few words, so he doesn't
Mhm.
really say a whole lot. Uh,
I'm
so
curious what they do with the dub because he almost does not talk in the Japanese version.
yeah, in like and this is one where I was like, okay, the dub is a lot better. Sorry, the sub is a lot better because I tried watching the English version and I'm like, this is horrible.
Well, it was also the 80s, right?
Yeah, so they didn't have the funding for it.
Cartoons were for kids only in America. They weren't.
Right. Even though you're like seeing bodies explode
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Like that was part of the reason it took me a while to watch the show because it gets pretty gory, even with the edits that they did to make the blood
They did a very good job with the edits.
more palatable for me personally.
They must have had to really, I don't want to, say they paid somebody under the table, but some of this stuff, it's really tricky how you would put this on Japanese serialized TV at the time, right? You couldn't show these wounds with blood, so the person becomes like a silhouette and the background becomes red and then their silhouette gets torn apart when the pressure point kung fu destroys them. And it's like, was this stylistically intended or is this a consequence of just not being able to show that?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Like whenever they change any kind of dubbing when it comes to different countries, it's almost like you get a different product completely. Like Sailor Moon is a great example of that.
Oh yeah,
with like the Saturn and Uranus.
They were a couple in Japan, right? And they're supposed to be like sisters.
They're a lesbian, 100% lesbian couple. And in the US version, I remember watching this as a kid on Toonami and being utterly confused. Like, what is up with the incest? Because they're cousins.
And a lot of ones were like that. I remember Pokemon too. At one point, Ash pulls out a Tauros and was like, wait, when did he catch this bull? It's like, oh, that's an episode you didn't see in America because someone holds a gun to Ash's head.
Oh, I did hear about that. Yeah.
You're not allowed to show a gun being held to a 10-year-old's head over here.
Which, to be fair, I'm okay with that.
Like, he deserved it in the anime.
Well, I'm okay not seeing a gun as a child in a show like that.
Definitely.
But like, it is kind of goofy to like, anime is something that's really in the middle sometimes on how they show children. Like cartoon is considered a kid thing, but it's not. It's just really that's one of the things I try to really push in this podcast is like, it's not just a thing for kids. It's another medium of art.
Oh yeah. In Japan, there's comics for all ages. Lonely, much older people. I mean, this one was obviously one for teenage boys with all the action and awesomeness. And also just props to them for actually being able to show that much action, right? They managed to get around the censorship in a way that looks really stylized. And I mean, it still seems fresh today.
It honestly is a lot of fun because, and that's where we can probably go into, it seems really fresh today. And what's cool is that like, I think it works for people like us who are in their early 30s because we grew up seeing a lot of anime that was influenced by this.
Yes.
You can see it you can see the fights and Dragon Ball comes around the same time. Well, like I would say Dragon Ball Z really takes a lot from this. Araki, I'm pretty sure Araki said himself was like, yeah, I was inspired a lot.
100% JoJo's was inspired by this.
Because Jonathan and Jotaro are like carbon copies of Kenshiro.
Giant chests. The Dragon Ball Z where their hands are moving so fast that it's like
a blur.
That's totally from Fist of the North Star as well. Or?
Right. And it's just like, okay, like ki blast and ki energy. Like even though ki blast and ki energies were like high levels of what they did in Fist of the North Star, but like just in terms of like the hand-to-hand combat.
But they never had like laser projectiles from ki. It was more like, it's serious because the holy flame is around him. If you can,
it was more of an artistic choice to show like, because that's one part where he fights Rao and he's like, do you even have your ki ready? And he's like, yeah, I do. And he's like, oh wow, you've grown up, little brother. So
yeah, the show was great for all the other things it influenced and all the influences it took from other anime as well. And like Kunal said, it's perfect for guys like us obsessed with history, right at that cusp of 30 years old, where we saw a lot of this stuff. And a lot of this stuff was, only available on VHS if you bought it from somewhere else in a catalog.
You had to have a legit anime dealer.
And not to say that you're when we were kids.
Not to say that you're not an anime dealer in my eyes.
I was all digital, man. Torrents and whatnot. I don't even know how they navigated, getting English subtitles for this stuff on
There's a
VHS.
whole podcast about that, and it was called Anime in America, and I heard it a couple years ago. It was really interesting, but there's like it's a lot of information.
Oh yeah.
They to make it a snippet, like for a while, people would take it and make their own subtitles. Sometimes they would get so you get that, and then you get ones from the company that weren't done very well, and then they would get then they eventually got funding and did a better job, and people were like, "What is this bullshit? What are you doing? This is our stuff because we did the work for it." Where it's like they technically pirated it, so
technically, that was the only way to see it at the time,
right? So there's a whole back and forth about it and how it works.
But also, this show it just has a bunch of influences that, if I can go over really quickly,
yeah, sure,
really made it. Well, it taught me a lot about other shows at the same time. And, you see a lot of shows even today that were directly influenced by this because it's late 80s, early 90s. There's the character Mamiya who appears in several seasons.
It's like second or third, I think.
The redhead. And she fights with the yo-yos. They're bladed yo-yos.
She's one of the coolest characters there.
She is fun. It's great that they have a strong woman in this show that's 99% about men.
Yeah,
but she's great. Right? Apparently she's a reference to another anime that was popular at the time. Late 80s, early 90s had a lot of delinquent girl anime in Japan. Apparently that's just what the series are called, or the genre. So there are several ones like Sukeban Deka. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but that was also a Japanese heroine at the time who fought with a yo-yo, and you can sort of see, oh, we need more stuff to fill out this awesome show. Let's just grab these side characters from other works that are popular.
Yeah,
the little girl, Lin.
Yeah.
I believe she's a reference to magical girl Minky Momo.
Okay.
Because they have the same character designer and creator. And if you pull up an image of them, they have the same pink hair.
Carbon copy. Yeah.
Pretty much, except, Minky Momo is modern day and she has fancy dresses. And this is post-apocalypse. And poor Lin's wearing like a burlap sap hat.
And like a headband and something like that.
Yeah. I like that character, even though she was very much the little girl damsel in distress half the time.
Yeah, there are problems, and I'll address that later on.
I don't know. Yeah. Her really only problem is that it seems like they needed her to fill screen time, right? How many times is she just crying for Ken? Yeah. But also she's important, right? I think he cures her sight in the very first episode.
So that's what sets the cool part about. It's one of the things I actually really like about the acupuncture martial arts system is that it's not just for killing. You can technically use it to heal people. And understand the body. There's even a point where Japaneses, who I like to call who's Toki, one of the
character's older brother.
Right. I don't remember if he's by blood or by bond, but yeah, Toki.
Yeah, you never see his parents. Sort of just starts with him in the martial arts school in the weird flashback.
Right. And so Toki is very adept. He could kill if he wanted to, but he's more of a natural healer.
Yeah.
And he actually is the one that teaches Kenshiro how to take down stronger opponents.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Learned a lot of cool moves as the series goes on.
Very cyclical, very Aikido-like, very leverage system based. So
although you do have to suspend your disbelief a little bit because it's like, oh yeah, jab these 2 fingers into this person's temple to cure their blindness.
Yeah, and then it was just totally fine after that. But it was cool because you're like, oh, okay, it's not just... I'll tell you more about that later. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the music because you definitely loved it. In fact, to get in the mode today when we were dealing with audio issues, we were playing some of the music.
The music is great.
Yeah, awesome soundtrack. Silent Survivor is the best one. You a Shock is probably if you ever feeling like you need to use these for workouts.
Pump you up. Yeah. Dude, I still listen to them when I work out today.
Hell yeah.
Especially You Was Shock. I'm forgetting the band name. I should have looked it up. But there's several songs where they'll have a male vocalist and he'll sing these awesome notes. And then the woman will chip in. And oh my gosh, she's just so intense. I should have looked up her name.
Just radically kills it after that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Walking into the Sunset. Great music. Check out the soundtrack when you can.
It really, it's mostly on Spotify or YouTube at this point. So it's pretty great.
Well, I mean, I think it was originally on vinyl, so it's had a million chances to come out.
And that's the crazy part. So this is something you brought up today when we were off air. It beats a lot of let me see if I can pull up the...
Oh, it's an enormously popular franchise.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a little surprising because you almost never hear about it in the West.
Has more money than One Piece.
Yeah, it's made more as a franchise.
Which is ridiculous because people don't even talk about this anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I will, albeit there has been a resurgence in the past 5 to 7 years, but before that, none was really talked about. And it was very, very, very weird they had to just be quiet for so long.
Yeah. Some random YouTuber was how I learned about it. You had doing research to figure out about it.
Yeah. I don't know why that's the case.
You'd think this show would be enormously popular and just by money, I mean, pulled this up a little earlier. I think it's like right up there with Barbie as a
I think
franchise that's made huge amounts of
like
money.
right underneath it, which is an accomplishment in
Yeah.
itself.
I mean,
We
it's made more money than the Cars franchise, which is Pixar's
Which is
toy
ridiculous
franchise.
because that was ever present and ever spoken of, honestly.
Mhm.
We can throw those links in the show notes, that's no
Yeah, it was
problem.
a really cool website that showed the breakdown too. And I think the most interesting takeaway from the breakdown was just that a big portion of the Fist of the North Star uh, revenue proceeds, whatever, however they
Yeah,
shook it out, was
video games.
video games.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, what's I think one or two that were PlayStation exclusive in the West. Apparently, they're huge in Japan.
So there was a lot that was on, like, I think Sega or Super Nintendo, and there's a couple of, like, they were fighting games. So they were, like, akin to, like, Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. Like, the guy I worked at GameStop with who talked about he had seen that, and it's a fun, like, thing if you just wanted to watch someone do, like, an absolute perfect on taking out
Yeah.
somebody. They just play as Kenshiro and mop the floor at everybody. So that one, but then also the one they released a couple of years ago, and this is actually one of the reasons I love this series even more, is because the Yakuza team, which everyone who's my friend right now knows I love this series,
It's great.
including Patrick.
I only played Yakuza 0, but I loved it.
Honestly, I'm
100%.
planning on doing an episode later about it, so stay tuned.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
need help with that. And
definitely.
the series is perfect for that sort of a game, right? A
Yeah.
brawler, a spectacle fighter.
Exactly.
Fill up the meter and then watch the finishing moves from the anime.
And you can
remember?
actually, like, it is kind of weird and clunky in how you use the controls, but once you get used to it, it's fine. And so,
Camera's always tricky in those third persons.
right. So Fist of the North Star, Lost Paradise, and there's just these crazy, like attacks that he does, like nine pains, 10 deaths, or he does the 100 fist attack, and there's a bunch of cool shit that
The special move names are always amazingly entertaining.
And that was one thing you pointed out too, that they would do a lot of freeze frames and show the new attack he would use for that person.
Oh, it might be the only time you'd see it.
Honestly, yeah.
It would be some very specific kick thing. And it was just super cool and stylized. Looking at it with the critical eye, you may think, oh, this is just filling up more time, right? There's 5 to 10 seconds that they don't have to animate anything.
Yeah.
They just have the freeze frame of,
And that's the thing, like,
awesome.
it's the 80s, like, you don't have streaming the way you do today. You might catch it a couple of months from now if they replay it. I don't know how they would run the schedule for that, but, you see it, you enjoy it, and you kind of move on. Now we have, posterity. And internet and like streaming and whatnot. So
and you'd have people binge a whole season, and you can't really reuse the flying kick animation. If
people get annoyed by that.
Yeah,
technology and expectations have been raised in that way. But
and it was also how you'd sell it back then, right? Oh, we have so and so many minutes of animation from this show. We can repackage this into a movie. And there were several Fist of the North Star movies that I have not watched. I don't know if you've seen any. I don't know if the pacing is better or if it's just like a highlight reel, for lack of a better term.
Nah, yes and no. I watched one of them recently, like back in January, with a buddy of mine. I'll give him a shout out, Aaron, who hadn't seen it, but like has been wanting to find another anime buddy. So I got to introduce you guys together.
Oh, yeah.
He's super cool, dude. He is really, really, he loved it. And when I was watching it with him, I was like, oh, okay. So they basically took the entire series and, like, I think they took the first 75% of it, shrunk it, and put it into a movie.
Wow.
So it was a lot. And I knew what was going on because I'd seen the show.
Mm-hmm.
And he enjoyed it for what it was, which he's like, he's just getting exposure to it. It's so, like, I know a lot of them are like condensed versions of that. And then they changed the animation style on a couple of them to make it more palatable for today. So yeah, it's good. I haven't seen a whole lot of them. Again, this is more on the anime today.
Yeah, check out those movies sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to. So
there were a lot of long establishing shots panning over the desert in the TV show.
I mean, they're fucking cool though.
They were cool. They're a great way to start it, but I could easily imagine cutting that out, and fighting 3 people back to back. And boom.
There was a lot of
episodes.
Like we said earlier, there's a lot of scenic shots, and that's why I felt, in terms of cinematography, the Yakuza team was actually perfect for that, because not only are they both brawler games, but they even use the same voice actors. So like Kiryu Takeo Kuroda is actually voicing Kenshiro.
Oh wow, how great!
Yeah, and then Nishikiyama, his younger brother, is voicing Shin. So it's just everyone is kind of chuckling to themselves while they're playing it. The game actually starts with you defeating Shin.
And that was PlayStation 4 exclusive?
PlayStation exclusive, yeah.
Oh, okay.
As much as I hate Sony for doing that, it was a solid game.
Really want to play it. I just can't justify an entire PlayStation 4 game.
I understand that, and I don't blame you at all. So yeah, so there's some other things. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of your notes? Because I got a bunch of stuff.
I think the number one thing was just how many other things it inspired me to look up and be interested in.
Take it away. Yeah.
One of the things that the later seasons, when things get super intense, is they have this guy opening and ending with like a monologue.
Oh
And
yeah.
it was so cool. He's like smacking the two little wooden blocks together to start, and then he's just getting so hyped and he's like screaming over the top. And it's just amazingly awesome when he's talking about, the savior of the victory of the century's end, who will save our entire society and the future of humankind. And it's just like, wow, this is awesome. And I'm pretty sure that's like a Rakugo performance.
I think you're right. And also, like, don't they mention like the chariot of the god? Like they show the chariot of like divine beings, like while that's going on.
It
Like there was at least 5 different openings for this show.
They get very metaphysical at some points, and it's
Yeah.
like, wait, am I supposed to be writing this down? Is this just for like the cool factor?
I don't think you're gonna be quizzed later, but yeah, that's pretty crazy. Like so, and I've seen some. Like, can you talk a little bit more about Rakugo? How much do you know about that?
Oh, it's just a sort of a performance
Okay.
over there. I believe it's like one guy on a stage, and he's supposed to tell a sort of poetic rhyming story. And there's all these sorts of caveats, like how a haiku is supposed to have a reference to the season in it, even though in the West we don't really do that.
Yeah.
They would have a sort of, what time of season this takes place in, what moral lessons you've learned from this. And I don't know, it's interesting, sort of not something we have at all over here.
Yeah, it's kind of storytelling is something that kind of only exists in podcasts out here, which is what it is.
There's no stand-up comedy night for this sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah,
honestly.
I don't know.
One thing I do want to mention, I don't think we talked about like, well, we did a little bit, but there's a part where we talk about how this is influenced by the West. So you could say like definitely Mad Max and et cetera, but even very much Kenshiro is drawn like Stallone from a lot of his action movies. Not so much Rambo, but more like Cobra, and just like the kind of like the clean cut kind of look.
It's so funny to see like almost Bruce Lee hair, but then like Stallone lip and chin.
It's like he walks around like Stallone, but fights like Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
But then wanders the desert like Mel Gibson.
It's everything. It's so much fun.
It's really wild.
And just, even the throwaway bad guys, they feel like 80s characters. They feel like G.I. Joes and their silly cars. And then, bring these ripped plastic guys out to get punched by the main character. It's great fun.
They come in and kill a bunch of villagers. And then he's like, what the hell?
And, you take like 2 seconds to look at it and you go, oh, these scared villagers and their robes. That's another almost kind of funny thing is that they look almost like the Mujahideen from like the 70s or 80s back before.
The Mujahideen?
Oh, sorry. I'm saying it wrong.
That's how I've heard about them. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, but just that, back in that day, they were fighting the Soviets and they were our allies. I think it was Rambo 3 where
the gallant people
were the good guys.
Yeah, like they even end the movie by saying that we dedicate this film to the gallant people to Afghanistan. I remember that very clearly.
Rambo 3. So it's just very funny to be like, oh, pan over the good guys. It's a bunch of white people dressed like the Mujahideen, and then the villains all look like ridiculous roid monsters from a WWE event driving motors. 4 million motorcycles. They have a shortage of absolutely everything in the post-apocalypse except motorcycles.
Yeah, they got plenty of bikes. They got plenty of bikes and protein powder. Like
it's just funny that they would almost never do that nowadays. You wouldn't have people be Arab coded and not at any point bring that up at any other time.
Yeah,
they're just essentially background characters, and it's just interesting like that. I guess Dune also did that a lot too.
Dune did that a lot, which is why I have some gripes about Dune, but that's a different story for
another podcast for another day. I still haven't seen Dune Part 2, so
I haven't either.
Actually. I love that book though.
So I just want to talk about some other things. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
Not too much on my notes. Let's see.
I got a bunch that you could probably jump in on once I start.
Yeah. Go start with your stuff.
All right, cool. So like stuff that I really love is stuff I've already mentioned, like how it's influential to other anime like JoJo's and DBZ. Any other shonen to this day has background to here. So I've actually had like acupuncture done on myself to help with just because I've had a lot of health issues in my life. And I've definitely seen it like, work. I do see that sometimes in my experience that it is kind of a money grab after a while where they some help, they try to keep you coming back. And I wish we didn't live in a capitalist world where they had to do that. But yeah.
But that's different than the acupuncture they have in this show, right?
Right.
This would be needles.
But here's the thing, though. Like
the self-healing without actually injuring you. This is like some guy's finger that he's jabbing into you. And
so the two creators, Sho Fumimura and Tetsuhara, those are the people that made Fist of the North Star. And Tetsuhara actually had heard about an article about Chinese acupuncture. This is why I'm bringing this up, because he heard about it like overstimulating someone's nerve, and the practitioner I don't think did a good job, and it caused him eye problems. So he's like, well, I don't know if I make a guy that fights and uses acupressure points. So that's where he got the idea from. And that was really cool because I've had some stuff done for my sinuses, from digestion, et cetera, et cetera. And you definitely feel like a change after it happens.
Really?
Yeah, like definitely was one time I was super, well, it was the TMI, but I was super constipated from a trip. And I remember visibly the guy putting a needle near the bottom of my stomach. And like as soon as I got up, I had to run to the bathroom.
Oh no.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, this kind of works. So that was cool.
I had no idea. I thought it was only for muscle relaxant.
So it can be used for that. It's used for other things too. Well-being, libido, et cetera, et cetera. Like that's the whole thing is there. It's a medicinal practice. Unfortunately, I feel like sometimes you might not find the best ones, or you have to find a good one to do that. I've had whatever like help from it that I wanted to, and then now I'm doing better. So
I think it's the same with all industries without like a certification test, right?
Right. Like you actually
don't have to get a license or anything.
Yeah. And then I don't know, you have a black belt in Tang Soo Do as well. Yeah, no big deal or anything. But no, that's a big deal. It's a legit degree. I've seen it.
One of the things I'm proud of.
Hey, you worked hard for it. And so like I've learned, like in the combination of arts that I studied, I learned about some pressure points and nerve points. Did you learn any in Tang Soo Do, or not a whole lot?
Not really a whole lot. It was a lot of locks and things.
Okay.
It was less like use a pressure point for pain submission, and more like just twist their arm around their back and then they can't use it.
That's the catch, because like pressure points only work on some people, especially if you say you're a practitioner, you may have worked that kind of discomfort out. You might be someone who's super athletic and those don't work on you. It's not 100%.
Yeah.
So
that's always the classic example of kick them in the nuts, and then was the Chinese art where they
just
hit themselves so many times there that they just iron.
They're just iron, or like there's actually a muscle that can retract a little bit, so you can kind of pull it in so it doesn't hurt as much. But yeah, they could just like deaden the nerves are out there, which I would not recommend because I like having nerves out there. But yeah, so that's really cool because it's always cool, even if it's a exaggerated version of what you're doing. They're doing that version in the anime, because like that's just kind of cool to see that being done and something.
Yeah, it's nice to get it featured. I mean, I can't think of another anime that has pressure points and acupuncture as one of the main tenets.
They did it in like Legend of Korra, but like even because she goes to an acupuncturist specifically.
Oh,
but that was the only time I've ever seen it elsewhere that I remember.
It's also neat that they decided to use that instead of guns. I think somebody has a crossbow, but almost nobody has any guns in the show.
Hell yeah, they have a crossbow. Then Kenshiro literally catches the arrow in it with his two fingers, and then just turns his hands around, opens his fingers, and somehow the arrow shoots right back and kills that guy.
Yeah.
How can you not forget that scene?
It's awesome.
It's the best.
And speaking of other references, I think that was parodied in JoJo's, where it's with the pasta, and Caesar catches it with his fork and turns it back around.
Turns it around. That's right. When he meets Jonathan for the first time,
they do a long fight.
Joseph, not Jonathan.
It's so hard to keep the JoJo's.
It's hard to keep them straight.
Separate,
yeah. That JoJo is one of my favorite JoJos because he has a personality.
Joseph Joestar.
I love how Kenshiro, the main character, is such a kind person to all people he meets. He's not intrinsically a mean person and only kills those who really cause harm. I think that's really cool. It's something that like I find annoying in comic book movies. Is like, oh, I don't know if I should kill this person or not. I'm going to be a monster. And I'm like, dude, yeah. If you let him live, he's going to go and do the same thing again. But there's no, like, we tried capturing him and all that stuff. Just in the comic book world, just kill him. That's my thing. Like, so whenever I saw a character like this, he was a good balance of like protecting those he cared for and dishing out violence in a world that had no law. So
yeah,
yeah,
I agree with that. It's nice that he sort of has that, and it may just be because your examples were DC and Marvel comics. That just makes me think that you can't really show a character changing the world and still have it being set in our modern world.
Right.
Like I almost think that's an issue with Captain America in the modern movie franchises right now
Yeah.
because he would be champion of truth and justice in the American way and fight back if
Yep.
America was doing something wrong. And now he's a Disney product and he can't really do that.
No.
But if you set it in the post-apocalypse and don't have any connections to anything, any ties to any country, they don't even tell you what. I mean, it's kind of implied that this is a desert that used to be the ocean, that it's not a country.
Yeah, and then you find out that there is an ocean and that there's a whole like thing that there's a whole continent around there, but like no one goes there because that is scary, which is terrifying to hear because where they are right now is terrifying in the first place. So yeah,
it's great that they can create a whole world, but also the flip side is they don't do a lot of world building in this world.
We'll get to that. Hang on. And I mentioned this before, but I love how the knowledge of pressure points is not just for killing; it can be super restorative. There's like evidence with Lynn where he heals her ability to be mute because she saw her parents get killed in front of her.
Oh, was it blind or mute?
She was mute.
First season?
She could see, but she couldn't talk.
Oh, I misremembered earlier.
Yeah, it's all good. There's a lot to remember.
I think that was episode 1 of the first season.
It is. It is episode 1.
And then forgive my memory.
And then Toki is able to actually kill people by like unlocking their endorphins. So that way they die a happy death instead of like one that's full of pain.
Yeah, Toki, the older brother, was much better at the healing arts.
I like to call him Japanese.
Yeah. He's very much Jesus hair and be good to everyone. And even though it was implied that he was stronger than Kenshiro, he never used it like that. So it was just nice that they have all these different examples of strong, manly men being good to each other.
Right. It's cool to see. This is a big thing. So there's this theme in the show about celestials, and so like when I say that I mean astronomy,
celestial bodies,
celestial, like just like like
I understand completely. I mean, he's got the Big Dipper scarred onto his chest,
right? So Hokuto no Shinken is Big Dipper God Fist, and Nanto Saiken, which is another art that is done that Shin was a part of, is South Dipper Holy Fist. So there's this theme in the show of astronomy being divine and powerful, and
your destiny too somehow,
right? Because specifically with the destiny, there's a couple characters who see the death omen star, and if you see the death omen star, you're not long for this world. No one else can see it except for those who are about to die. So it's pretty cool that way because like Rao wants to, and I don't know what he means by this because Rao is so iconic as the bad guy, and he's the one that you face after Shin, and he wants to conquer the heavens.
I'm not sure if that's metaphorical.
I don't fully understand what that means, but then again, there is a very big, as much as it is physical, there is a great divine angle that is played into this anime. So it's there's a lot of almost mystery that comes with it. If you read the manga, you probably know more. But
not just individual destiny, but the destiny that you acquire by practicing these martial arts.
Right.
And what that means for, the people who practice them, the people who talk to the people who practice these arts, what it means for society in the future. In my head, I just sort of shorten it to rule the world.
Basically.
Because like, what are we going to turn this into, right?
Yeah. That's a history major right there. Yeah. Look at his analysis. I love Ray. He's one of the coolest side characters to ever grace the anime screen.
It was wonderful. He shows up. You don't know if he's going to be good or evil. Right. Fight a little bit.
He's trained in the Southern Waterfowl Fist, which is another variety art that happens with
flying through the air, splashing.
And he has this cool like sound that they do. That it's almost like he's using garrote wires when he's killing people.
Yes.
He doesn't actually, but it looks like he's holding a net. That's what he's doing.
Whereas with Kenshiro, they sort of bubble up and explode. When Ray kills them, it's like lines go down, they sliced into ribbons.
Yeah.
It's very cool, the variety of different martial arts and cool things and characters and people you meet. And especially Ray, who sort of gets introduced as a villain and then sort of becomes a main character's friend. You see that over and over and over again in shows that are inspired by this, like JoJo's Bizarre.
They did it in JoJo's with Caesar Zappelli.
Oh, I mean, Koyan too.
Yeah. Kakyoin's a great example too. Yeah.
You go down the list. There's so many people.
Yeah, there's a couple more, but specific to Ray, there was an episode where someone is holding Ray's sister captive, and he forces Ray and Kenshiro to fight to the death. And Ray whispers something to him, and Kenshiro looks at him surprised, and he's like, kind of nods, like as if he's like, I didn't know you knew that, but I'll play along. and they actually fight each other to the point where they knock each other out in a vital area, cough up some blood, and look like they're dead. So then the bad guy releases the villain, and then they wake up and kill that guy too. It was really cool because it shows like it kind of paralleled people who learn martial arts and meet someone else who is high-ranking martial artist, and they kind of do like light sparring, and you find out the similarities that happen. Like in certain Wing Chun stances, you'll find some similarities with karate, actually. And if you look at some other styles in Kali, you'll find similarities in arts that were like far away from each other, but definitely had some influence. And when you mention something, like, oh yeah, I know that, but in a different way. And so that was really cool for me to see that scene. I remember that very, very intensely.
Which makes sense for martial artists. I mean,
yeah,
the human body's a gangly, weird thing with different length limbs. There's only so many ways you can generate power.
And there's only so many until you develop, like, there's a famous phrase by Bruce Lee, until you develop more arms and legs, there's only going to be so many ways you can fight.
Yeah.
I would add that there's only so many ways you can fight, and they kind of get reinvented and forgotten. So, like I said before, there's multiple assassin style arts like Nanto Saiken, which I mentioned. That was the South Dipper Holy Fist, and they aren't supposed to fight each other. But the Fist of the North Star, Hokuto no Shinken, the Big Dipper God Fist, has to restabilize the world whenever that happens. So there's this cool lore that goes into it.
It's not clear if this is a cyclical thing that has happened before, or if this is just what their master told them they had to do.
So Ryuken is the guy who teaches Ken and the other candidates for Fist of the North Star.
I believe he only shows up in flashback, right?
He does. He is dead by the time the show starts because Rao kills him.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert on that. Some of this is pretty early on, so
he's killed in, I think, the same flashback that he's introduced. Don't
honestly, yeah, like give us a break. And that's very interesting to me that there's multiple candidates for it. And those brothers, we haven't mentioned all of them yet, but they show up later.
Yeah, quote unquote brothers. They go to the same school. I don't think they're actually related.
Some are, some aren't.
Rao's like 2 feet taller.
Yeah. And then the moment you get to the Asura arc, which is the last season of the show, that's when a ton more lore gets thrown into there. And I know we've spoiled a lot out here, but you find out that not the entire Earth, like we mentioned earlier, was bombarded by nuclear waste and everything. And Kenshiro find out in the Asura arc that there's actually like a whole different part. And then everyone who you've met at this point is terrified of that part of the world, which is insane. And
at this point, you've been introduced to a large number of guys who have their own armies, right?
Yeah.
Souther.
Yeah, Souther. And then everyone in the Asura region or the Asura arc is a trained assassin. So like they can come out of the bushes and fucking try to kill you and shit.
Which is funny too, because this takes place slightly in the future, but these 1,000-year-old assassination arts are like around every corner.
And especially here. Like here they're like very, very like honed in and whatnot. But yeah, that's a really cool part. I love the fact that there were multiple candidates for Hokuto no Shinken, and he gets chosen to be the successor because he has restraint.
Yeah, despite not being the largest or the most skilled.
He's given the opportunity because it's like Ryuken's like, okay, I know someone like you will not abuse this. And I love that. I wish that was done more and more these days, where you pass on knowledge to someone who won't who actually like will honor the sheath of it, because there's multiple times where they're sparring and training and he's about to he's sparring with Rao, and he's like, Rao like knocks him down. He's like, I won. And Ryuken goes like, just wait. And then you wait like 10 seconds and he gets a bunch of bruises on his body. So Kenshiro was holding back, and Ryuken keeps on telling him, stop holding back so much. You're gonna get hurt. He's like, Kenshiro is just not someone who loves to kill. He only does it when he has to. And I really respect that about him. And because of that, he's able to learn the ultimate Hokuto Shinken technique, which is Muso Tensei. He's able to like create a mirage of him and able to fight multiple enemies that way. So it's fucking cool.
Yeah, it was an awesome move. And he's just a great empathetic character. One of the lines, I forget who says it, is understanding people's true sadness is your power, Kenshiro. And it's like true.
That's dope.
He is willing to forgive and forget if possible.
He's
do whatever it needs to be, explode somebody's head with pressure points.
He has a point where I think he would forgive, but whenever you Like there's no second chance. There's no third chance, I'll say.
Yeah, sometimes they'll do something where the pressure point move will kill them if they walk forward, but save them if they walk backwards.
Yeah.
Just interesting little things like that.
I think the first or second episode, there's this one guy who's like, I know Hokoto Shinken, and he's like, fine, go ahead and do it. And he does what he thinks is Hokoto Shinken, and he tries to do the pressure points to Kenshiro. And he's like, haha, it'll work. He's like, no, you're already dead. And then that guy explodes. There's another part where like he does, it's in I know for a fact this is in the first episode. He does something on the Toro points. So he puts them on the side of his temples. And then they put a timer on the screen and they never do it again. They never do it again. And there's a timer on the screen is like 8 seconds and he walks away and then you just see this explosion. Ultimate way of walking away from explosions is in the show. Yeah, there's a part where the Nanto Saiken general, Shu, when Kenshiro is still training to show that he can be the successor, he's a teenager, he's thrown into a kumite, which is like he has to fight like 10 dudes in sequential order and defeat them. And Shu sees his ability, but he knows he's being overwhelmed and unfairly overwhelmed. In fact, he was brought into this so he could get killed off by his older brother. So what Shu does is he actually stops it, and all the other generals are like, "You can't do that. We have to follow the rules on this." And so what Shu does, it's not done too gruesomely, but he's like, "I believe in this kid so much that I'm going to blind myself," and he just scratches his face. There's no like explosion of the eyeball, so don't worry. But he does that, and then later on, you see him and they have a really cool episode and stuff. A really heartfelt episode of what that guy does for how he believes in people. And if it wasn't for him, Kenshiro would probably be killed.
Yeah. And that's several seasons in because a lot of the stuff they added was just,
beautiful.
He just knows Hokuto no Shinken in the very first episode. They don't have any explanation why.
Nothing.
And then when they try to explain more, it just sort of brings up more questions. It's a 2,000-year-old art from China.
Right.
Well, where are we now?
Yeah. And like, is this Japan? Like, what is going on here?
They don't look very Japanese.
There's even, it's anime characters. They never make like that.
Well, they just turn it up to 11, right? Every one of the villains is enormous.
Yeah.
Usually fat too, evil and sneering, and they're all done by the voice actor who's, really just turning it up to 11,
But when it's super heartfelt, it's heartfelt because going back with Shu, there's this part where Kenshiro is like temporarily knocked out, and it's almost like biblical. There's a lot of like religious overtones in the story of Buddhism. I would probably say there's some like leftovers from Hinduism and Christianity. There's a part where they save Kenshiro from a major villain, Souther, and they put him almost like they Moses him to safety temporarily. And there's a beautiful scene that I never forgot. And he like picks up Kenshiro's hands while he's resting, and he's like, "These fists will rebuild the world." And he just kind of like gingerly sets them back down and pushes them off to safety.
Yeah, there's a lot like that.
There's just something that really like, isn't that
biblical metaphors, brother against brother.
Yeah.
It's even has his own pyramid that he dies on. If you want to,
yeah.
But yeah, it's wonderfully great show, and wonderful that they really try to make characters that you feel for, and then make you cry about them, and not just punch people and make them explode all.
Yeah, there's a ton of depth that comes.
I'm really curious if other shows did this, or what would have inspired this, because I mean, you totally see this in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I mean, I think we started that right after this because we wanted more Fist of the North Star, manly men punching each other.
And the first section of JoJo's is basically that. Yeah. Like they don't use stands until Jotaro comes around. So I love the feature of like everyone sees Kenshiro's ability, they're afraid of it, and they cover up bravado and whatever sneakiness, like his brother Jagi, who's like a fucking bastard. Has the best music though, but he is a goddamn bastard.
Even side characters like Bot, very impressed by it, but he also hid under several things when Kenshiro was exploding.
So that dude just like survives throughout the show. He just survives and is able to fix a go-kart.
I really wanted him to die at the beginning because he was so annoying, but then he just kept coming back and being helpful. For some reason, this small child knows how to fix a car.
I mean, he comes really helpful and like, just for being a mechanic and for just knowing when to be a coward. Because sometimes you just need to survive in that.
And they actually aged him up in the final season.
They do. They make him like really worth it in the later part of the show. he's really good, and he actually like you actually have a lot of respect for him
Hmm.
afterwards.
One of those few characters that really, oh, well, a lot of these shows, the main character can't die. But
Yeah,
if they introduce a secondary character like this, like Kuwabara from Yu Yu Hakusho,
yeah. You end up loving him so much
yeah,
because of
and
how
also
much
there's so
heart he
much more
has.
suspense, right?
Yeah,
Ken can't die, but maybe Bot can die,
yeah.
right?
And maybe Lynn can die, but then you find out she is related to Nanto, like the pole stars and everything.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, "What are those?" And so, okay, no one knows about this, so we're all learning at the same time.
Yeah, she goes from being a sort of a nothing character, damsel in distress, to show off Kenshiro's powers in the first episode to just, you know,
She's
we
a
gotta have more,
right,
more awesome stuff. Keep packing this anime full.
yeah, and you find out that she's incredibly important later on. I love how Hakoto Shinken actually adapts and picks up other attacks
Hmm.
that these like assassination styles fight you with. So like he'll fight one dude, Kenshiro will fight one dude, and then another episode he's like, someone will be like, "Hey, how'd you do that?" He's like, "Hakoto Shinken can learn from its attackers." So
Yeah.
he just picks it up. It's very JKD like, very Bruce Lee like, honestly. So it taps into 70% of the human power that is latent, whereas like most human beings only have 30. And while it's picking up that latent 70%, it also enables you the ability to shoot arrows back at people, as we learned very, very well. There's some other stuff that I wanted to talk about that like I definitely will call bullshit where bullshit is. It is hyper violent, it is hyper masculine, it is very damsel and distressing. There's probably a lot of cultural things that we did not catch that were not, shall we say, kind.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like there's
Half the time it feels like a shortcut, right? Oh,
yeah,
introduce this old man. Oh, kill off this sympathetic old man so we have
right.
a reason to hate the monster of the week this week.
Yeah, that and also like there's a character named Uyghur, and I wonder like how much of that was maybe in poor taste or
Oh, I
something.
don't remember him. Who is Uyghur?
That's the thing. He gets killed off really quickly.
Oh.
So he there's some stuff that we may or may not be missing, but we did our best with this episode. We wanted to show you like why we found it interesting as
Mhm.
opposed to like give you a whole rundown of the show. It's a really great story, really interesting setup. It does have, it is a post-apocalyptic story, so it's going to be the way it is. But if you stick around past the first season, you'll be surprised at how good it gets.
Mhm. If you liked the first season, it just gets better and better. If you didn't like the first season, like it was too tedious or slow, I'd say still watch the second season.
I would
because,
agree.
I mean, they turn it up to 11 right after that season 1.
And they build that suspense really well. Like
Mhm.
you had a good point of like how they built suspense in that show, because one of the things I think is sometimes lost in like today's work, maybe that they build suspense a lot more with those scenic shots and those ways to buy them more time on the animation scale. But it did a good job of making you like
Yeah.
stay on the edge of your seat sometimes.
50-50, I'd say. It feels like
Yeah.
one of those old westerns. I don't know if you've ever seen probably gonna mess up his Italian name, Inicio Morricone?
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah.
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah. In fact, they reference a lot of Clint Eastwood in the show.
Definitely
And
feels
then
like that.
JoJo's did the same thing with how yeah. So like
Great manly man.
you follow the chain and it goes from there.
Mhm. And also, one of the things I want to point out was that it was a very serialized show because it was the time. Each episode, you're kind of supposed to reset the thing, and this sort of got around that by introducing these overarching villains that would then be in 5 or 6 episodes
Yeah.
before their conclusion. But very much this was designed around you could miss an episode, right? You might miss it this week,
And you'd be okay. Like it would kind of like be like some things would show up again, but like for the most part, you're right. It's a very bottled kind of Star Trek Next Generation kind of feel, where you could pick up an episode and be like, "Oh, okay, this is cool."
And maybe it's just me, but I kind of miss that nowadays, right?
I
Way
totally-
too often you get, 6 episodes of an hour each. You're watching like 3 movies back to back.
And
to
it's like
watch
homework.
Exactly.
It's homework. You have to talk to your friends about something that you're watching, and you're like, "I just kind of want to enjoy this."
Yeah. Oh, are you on this season? Are you up to this point? Don't worry about that with Fist of the North Star.
Yeah.
Within 2 seconds, you'll know which one the villain is, and you'll have fun watching him win.
Oh yeah,
Oh, it's great.
it's really fun. I mean, every time he powers up, like he just destroys his shirt, and in the next scene,
And the music.
his shirt's back.
Oh yeah, the shirt.
He has a just random ability. I forgot. We tried looking up for it earlier, but we forgot how he loses one of his shoulder pads.
I distinctly remember him getting a new costume and
Yeah.
then losing that shoulder pad like in the next episode.
That sounds right. I'm gonna believe you on that one. In the video game, you actually there's a cutscene where you do one of the smaller side missions, and someone tries to shoot you with a double-barreled shotgun that's sawed off, and Kenshiro dodges, and his shoulder pad knocks off. So they just move on after that.
That's hilarious.
And it stays like that the rest of the game.
And that's totally an 80s design too, right?
Yeah.
You would never make asymmetrical shoulder pads on a modern character. It would just bother everybody too much.
It would bother me too. I didn't notice it until you pointed it out when we were watching it too. I was like, oh shit, he only has one shoulder pad. What the hell?
His look. Bright red shirt.
Yeah.
Torn jeans jacket.
And there's a goofy part too where he fights a dude who was wearing like the American flag and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
And later like wears his sunglasses and
I think his gauntlets too.
Yeah, it's not a glove, but it's like it goes almost halfway into his forearm and stuff like that. And he looks like Stallone in Cobra. And there's this cool thing that I do want to say is like I love this. Whoever was the voice actor for him did a fantastic job. I blanked on his name in researching it. Forgive me. But there's this part where he says where Joggy is fighting him and takes like a steel rod and just smacks him with it. And then he picks it out and you just see the indentation of his body. And he's like, oh, how's that possible? And he goes, Hokoto Shinken makes your body like iron. And then just comes up and starts fighting him again.
So cool.
There's a lot of
great ones.
There's a lot of cool parts if you want to just watch this for good cheese, for good fun, for honestly a good story. Like there is a story if you just stick with it.
And usually near the end of the season.
Yeah.
So like you probably can't hop on the last 12 episodes and get something of anything. But before then, like you said, Star Trek Next Generation, you get to see these characters grow, but at the speed of a season, not, oh, you missed last episode. You missed all their growth.
Right. Like they stretch it out. And it's a good thing that they do it, honestly.
It's just different than they do it nowadays. There's a lot of dead time, I'd say, but
there is, but
it's also way easier to jump into.
It is a lot easier to jump into, and
I wrote down serialized.
Yeah,
and I think that's the difference. They don't do it like this anymore.
They don't do it like this anymore. That's for sure.
Man, get off my lawn!
Yippee-ki-yay!
I want my anime to be hand drawn. Pay some small kid to flip the pages for me at 60 frames.
Oh my god! No, we don't want that.
No, digital is good.
Yeah, but it is something beautiful about watching all the hand drawn, and the music's amazing. So we've repeated ourselves a lot in this, but it's because we love this show so much. And please check it out. Please check out a couple clips. Let us know what you think. Patrick, thank you for coming on, brother.
Oh yeah, always happy to do it.
Yeah,
love anime. I'd talk about it any day. Yes. Talk about it too much if you let me.
He's an anime dealer, so I 100% will say that. And that's all we got today. Thank you.
All right.
Hey fan peeps, thanks for listening, and I'd love any feedback you have for me. Please follow the Facebook page, They Need a Hobby, and follow us everywhere, social media-wise, under the handle @TNAHpod. That goes for Twitter and Instagram, and one of these days, I'll be super popular.